Good afternoon, sports fans. Welcome to SNIQ, the show where we put your baseball knowledge to the test. As always, I'm joined by my Sportsnet.ca colleagues and baseball running mates, Arden, Zwelling, Ben Nicholson-Smith, and we're super pumped to present you guys with a Canada Day edition of SNIQ this time. We had our Stars and Subs theme last week. This time, we're going to go 10 questions about Canadian Blue Jays and 10 questions related to Canadians in MLB. We'll have a little bit of fun there. Certainly, it's been some interesting times for the Blue Jays over the past week. We are still awaiting to see where they are going to host their training camp and regular season games. They continue to wait for government approval, which at this point may not come until the end of this week. They're gathering in Dunedin, Florida for intake there. Guys, pretty chaotic times right now. What do you think is going on right now for the Blue Jays?
Well, this is a tough spot to be in. I think, Shi, to state the obvious, they don't know where they're going. I mean, if you're a player, you go to Dunedin initially, you set up there for potentially a couple days, potentially a few weeks. You don't know where you're going to be for the next month. You don't know where you're going to play this season. You can't tell your family that. It's a really tough spot for Blue Jays players to be in. Not the fault of the Blue Jays themselves, but this is far from ideal.
I think they'll work something out for Toronto. They're going through 3 levels of government here that they have to satisfy. So you think about if you've ever dealt with one level of government for, renewing a passport or getting a license plate or something like that, there's a lot of red tape there. So imagine trying to bring a baseball team into Toronto and dealing with municipal, provincial, and federal governments and all the stipulations and things that they're going to want you to satisfy. So I think that the thing for the Blue Jays is they weren't able to start this process until MLB and the union had a deal and until they realized that Dunedin wasn't going to be the best place for them. So they're a little bit behind here, but I think they'll get something done.
Well, we'll get into some of the nitty gritty, some of the details there. We'll really discuss that. A couple other things. Ben, you wrote about Nate Pearson today. We'll talk about him as well. But just a reminder of how we play the game. So we're going to give you the questions on this screen, and this is really designed to be a 2-device experience. So on your secondary device, call up kahoot.it and enter the game pin that you see on your screens right now, 4490608. You'll enter your answers into there. And as always, speed is important. The quicker you get your answer in, the higher a score you will get. And so without further ado, let us begin the Canada Day edition of SNIQ. All right, question number 1. On May 26, 2018, Russell Martin started at shortstop for the Jays. What other positions did he play for the Jays that year? Catcher, third base, left field, and center field, catcher, third and left, catcher and third, and just catcher. And guys, I think that a lot of scrambling that season in 2018 for the Jays, trying to fill out their roster. Certainly the scramble right now. But I think that there are a couple things at play from my reporting. What I've tried to figure out is the government has put a lot of effort into ensuring the pandemic is contained here north of the border. They want to be very careful in terms of what they're bringing in. And I think having the Blue Jays do all their intake testing in Florida, they'll be able to get a sense right away of where players are at. They can come in on one plane instead of coming in piecemeal in different sorts. That should allow them to be processed in a faster manner. And I think that's part of what's happening here. Because do you think that some of the discipline that's going to be involved in keeping everyone healthy over the long term is going to be there? Arden?
Well, yeah, you need player buy-in, right? Because it's not like you're going to be able to have some sort of enforcement crew that's going to stop guys from going to bars or meeting people off Tinder or what have you. So you need that player buy-in. And you mentioned that intake process. That's a pretty elaborate process. And I'm not surprised the Blue Jays made moves to just get that going now and to get everybody into Dunedin and doing that, because you're talking about a questionnaire that they would have had to fill out. Those answers would have had to be assessed, temperature checks, saliva tests, blood tests, a quarantine waiting for those testing results to come back. It's not a short process. So the Blue Jays need to start that as soon as possible.
Yeah, 100% on a timeline there. And that is what drove the decision that was made last night. The decision here, the Blue Jays had a lot of holes in 2018. Russell Martin filling a lot of them, a catcher, third base, left field, and shortstop. 23 of you recognizing that one. So a tough start right out of the gate here. We're going to go to the leaderboard. And we've got WAF with an early lead, Bree, RB85S, Joe, and P by P right on their tails. Ben, you got next.
All right, our second question here brings us to Paul Quantrill, who, of course, is the father of current Major Leaguer Cal Quantrill. He started his last Major League game in 1996. After that, he became a stud reliever. He was great out of the Blue Jays bullpen. Here's another tough one. I think a lot of people are going to be 0-2 after this one. Tell us what numbers he had. We'll let you contemplate that. And in the meantime, guys, Mark Shapiro, when he spoke to us on a conference call, I think it was Friday, he said the Blue Jays anticipate some positive tests. And I think that makes sense when you look at the world as a whole and just consider that baseball players are a subset of that. What do you think that will mean for this team when those test results start coming in and there presumably are some positive tests within this Blue Jays organization beyond? I mean, Shi, you've reported on some of these, but there's the potential for more positive tests even beyond what they initially know about.
Well, some of my additional reporting, I had a chance to speak to a couple of infectious disease experts who are also sports fans yesterday. I'll be writing about that later today. But, there's not, I don't want to say false positives because that's not the right term, but you can get positives long after someone has cleared the infectious stage or the symptomatic stage, because particles of infection that is dead and no longer active can linger for a while. So, one of the challenges for all teams across all sports, actually, when they're intaking players, is determining whether that player, what stage of infection is he at? Is he past it and these are just remnants, or is it active and contagious?
Yeah, very complicated stuff. In the meantime here, we saw a lot of wrong answers. This is good. Tough questions here for our Canada Day trivia. And let's take a look at the leaderboard after 2 questions here. And we see WAF holding strong, both flows. Ari Safari, that's a familiar name from last week. Popper and Jason as we hand it over to Arden.
Ari Safari back to avenge last week's loss. I like it. In December of 2014, the Jays acquired Michael Saunders from Seattle. Who did they send back to complete the deal? Justin Smoke, Danny Farquhar, Jay Happ, or Dominic Leone? And guys, you're not only going to have positive tests among players, you're probably going to have positive tests among coaches, among staff in the organization. I mean, we tend to think of all this just through, well, what happens if players test positive? There's a lot of other individuals who are going to be going through this intake screening and likely learning, guys, that they have the coronavirus as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. And I think, it's interesting to see some of the coaches in Minnesota basically sidestepping this season. The organization appears to have really driven that process. They're over 65 years old and they want to be cautious. I mean, I think when you look at staff members, the support staff, the coaches, they're in danger just like anyone else. In a lot of cases, they might not have the same means, the same salaries as the players. So all of that enters the equation as teams are preparing to get back to the field.
It's the mistake that we make when we talk about this, and that we only talk about the players. And really, there are so many people that are needed to pull off a major league season, whether it's coaches, staff, grounds crew, security, cleaning personnel, food and beverage, all sorts of people who are going to be at the ballpark and at the stadium. And not all of them are 27 to 28-year-olds in prime peak physical condition. A lot of them are older. A lot of them live by much more meager means than players do. So I think about all those people and their exposure to the virus as we try to start baseball back up here. Good on 29 of you who got that it was Jay Happ who was sent to Seattle for Michael Saunders. Obviously, Jay and Mike ended up playing together again, being reunited on the Blue Jays later on in their careers. Let's see how that has affected the leaderboard. Will WAF hold the lead? Yes, but Bo Flows is right there in second. Jason, G-Man 99, and Joe are trying to get involved in the conversation as well, Shi.
All right, next up, number 4. The Jays drafted James Paxton in 2009, but were unable to sign him. What notable name did they select the next year with the compensatory pick? Osher Wojciechowski, Noah Syndergaard, Aaron Sanchez, or Marcus Stroman? Guys, you mentioned the coaches who have opted out. We started getting our first player opt-outs yesterday too. Ryan Zimmerman, Ian Desmond, notably among them. And if you haven't read Ian Desmond's essay on some of his thinking about these times, definitely a worthwhile read on his Instagram page. But to this point, we haven't seen or heard about any Blue Jay opt-outs. Guys, do you think anybody on the Blue Jays might opt out?
I asked Mark Sparrow that question last week, and he said he wasn't expecting anyone to opt out. And when you look at the Blue Jays roster, it's mostly comprised of players 0 to 3 service time early in their careers. For a lot of them, I mean, it's just important for them to A, get paid, and B, have a year of service, on their record as they try to get to free agency as quickly as possible. So I think a lot of them probably aren't in a position that a Ryan Zimmerman or an Ian Desmond would be in, where they've made a bunch of money and they're towards the end of their careers, and they can kind of make a decision like that for their families. But, things can change, and we'll see over the coming days if anybody from the Blue Jays does in fact opt out.
Well, a lot of you opting into the correct answer on this one. 39, strong with this one. Noah Syndergaard is the compensatory pick, the correct answer. And 2 pretty good picks for the Blue Jays. Unfortunately for them, and neither of them ending up playing in a Blue Jays uniform. Let's check to see the leaderboard and see where we're at. No change right at the top. WAF continuing to lead. Bo Flow's on his tail. G-Man 99. Joe and Muck rounding out our top 5. As Ben, you got next.
All right, we're going to go back to a big moment for Dalton Pompey, Canadian player. Never quite lived up to the hype in Toronto, but he had some great moments, including in 2014, hit a home run off an all-star pitcher. Arden, just to sidetrack us briefly here from the overall discussion, I know that you could answer this trivia question correctly, but of course, we're the ones who wrote it. I think when we're looking at those decisions for players around the league, and when we're looking at the Toronto Blue Jays in particular, part of this is that we just don't know. We have to accept that in the course of the coming months, information might change. Someone might change their mind midway through the season. So I don't even think it's just as simple as saying, hey, this is what we know right now, because all of this could adapt really quickly as more people get infected, as information changes across the country, and of course here in Toronto.
Yeah, and I think that it comes down to how, there's an interesting kind of degree of, are you a high-risk individual or are you not? And as a player, if you have some sort of condition or something that could make you more susceptible to suffer kind of grave consequences of contracting the coronavirus, well, you could be classified as a high-risk individual, and you could sit out and still get paid, still get your service time. It makes it a much easier decision. But if you have a pregnant spouse, or if you have a newborn, or say you live with a parent who is elderly and immunocompromised, you don't get that benefit. You yourself are not a high-risk individual, even though you live with people who are. So you won't be able to have the security of knowing you can opt out and still be paid and still get your service time. It would be up to your club to consider your situation on a case-by-case basis and make that determination.
All right, a lot of correct answers here. Felix Hernandez, of course, gave up that home run. I remember, Arden, you wrote about that one, I'm pretty sure, at the time. I know we talked about it on At the Letters.
How do you remember that?
I have memories of you talking about it. But let's go to the leaderboard here. Let's see where WAF is still ahead of Bo Flows. We have Calamonsi on the board, along with Muck, G-Man 99. And your turn to ask the next question, Arden.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened this morning, Ben, so I'm impressed. After Matt Stairs unexpectedly led the team with a 917 OPS in 2007, what contract did they reward him with? So Matt Stairs at the time was like 38 or 39 shy, and he stepped in probably on a minor league deal, I would imagine, made the team, and ended up having like this ridiculous year that ended up earning himself a big league deal for his age 40 season.
No, it was actually a big league deal at the time. I remember because I remember talking to him at the winter meetings just after he signed it. And, he was, JP Ricciardi was a GM at the time. He remembered Matt Stairs from their time together with the Oakland Athletics. And it was amazing. He just came here and fit in perfectly from an offensive perspective. Really one of the most underrated, or one of the more underrated Canadians of all time. Just a guy who had a tremendous offensive career. And, the Blue Jays at one point during his time with Toronto, they ended up batting him leadoff well before, thinking of a strictly on base guy was popular. So this was he did a lot of great things for the Blue Jays and really had a remarkable little bit of a run here before they ended up trading him to Arizona, I believe.
You know what? You could name a bunch of teams because Matt Stairs played for like half the league.
Yeah.
Could have been any of them. And not an easy question to answer, as you see, is by that very even distribution of answers there. But it was, in fact, a 2-year, $3.25 million deal that Matt Stairs signed at the age of 40. And he actually ended up playing until he was like 43, as a pinch hitter for some NL clubs. And I think we might have another question about that later on in the quiz here. Let's see who got it right. Yeah, let's see. I almost gave something away there that I shouldn't have. WAF holding on to that lead, but you know what? It's a lot of pressure when you are setting the pace early on, as we've seen in recent weeks. It's it's tough to hold on to that top spot as the questions get more difficult. So we'll see if RB85S or Gman99 can catch up. Shy, on to you, my friend.
All right. As the leaderboard tightens, we go here. Top prospect Brett Lawrie was called up for his major league debut with the Jays in August of 2011. Who was optioned to make room? David Cooper, Eric Thames, Mike McCoy, Travis Snyder. That was fun talking about baseball a little bit, guys. And we've talked a lot about coronavirus and labor contracts. Let's stick with baseball a little bit. And Ben, you wrote today about Nate Pearson and the situation around him. The way I look at it, if he's not on the opening day roster, it is as blatant an example of service time manipulation as you can get. Where are you at right now with Nate Pearson?
Well, it's interesting because I remember a few months ago, we wrote kind of a back and forth going over the case for starting him in Toronto versus Buffalo. And at the time, I thought there was a legitimate developmental argument to be made for starting him in Buffalo, because at the time you could say that, hey, if you're working on your curveball, that's easier to do against minor league hitters in Scranton than it is at Yankee Stadium. And I bought into that to an extent. But now the choice is he's facing major league hitters or he's not facing anyone at all. Like it's intra-squad games or major league hitters. So at that point, I think the developmental answer is pretty obvious. He should be in the major leagues. A lot of correct answers here from our audience. Travis Snyder, the correct response as we take a look at the leaderboard. JR,
it's hard. It's hard to stay in first.
G-Man on the rise there with a little streak going on. I think that's what that flame means. So G-Man doing very well. Bo Flows, WAF, and Calamansi in there. And I think I might have just taken over there, guys. Sorry if I just jumped the queue with that.
You're always doing that.
That's right.
But let's let Arden take this next question.
Sure. Yeah, I would be happy to. Ducey, Stairs, Boucher, and Hill are the only Canadians to play for the Jays and Expos. That would be Rob Ducey, Matt Stairs, Denny Boucher, and Sean Hill, which two began their careers with Toronto. So we're talking about Nate Pearson here, and here's the way that I would look at it from the club's perspective. The upside of holding down Nate Pearson for those 7 to 10 days is you basically trade one start during a 60-game season in which who knows how competitive you're going to be, in exchange for an extra year of contractual control when Nate Pearson is 28 or however old they'll be in 2026, 2027, what we're looking at here. The downside, really bad PR. People like the three of us and basically everybody in Blue Jays media just crushing the team for this decision. You piss off the player and likely annoy a lot of people in that clubhouse who think you're not putting your best team on the field, and you anger his agent and you make things pretty acrimonious going forward. And perhaps you face a grievance from the union because it would be so nakedly obvious what you are doing. Do you guys agree those are kind of the pros and cons here? Have I missed anything?
Totally. And if I'm players union, I don't see how you don't grieve it immediately. And I would think you'd have a pretty compelling case because, with some of the other grievances, you think about Chris Bryant, there's some gray area there, but there's just no gray here. There is no sensible, logical argument that you can make saying that pitching at the alternative training site is better developmentally for the player than pitching in the major leagues.
Rob Ducey and Denny Boucher are the correct answers. How about 27 people getting that correct? Pretty impressive, although maybe some people recognize Rob Ducey from the photo that was put up. Let's see the leaderboard here. JR out of top spot. G-Man 99 is just cruising right now, 8 in a row. WAF hanging on there, trying to take top spot back over again. I'm going to throw it to Shy, and we'll see if Ben lets him actually finish his question this time.
It's actually exciting because we're seeing a lot more movement on the leaderboard today. Question number 9. Russell Martin, Dalton Pompey, Michael Saunders were the notable Canadians on the 2015-16 playoff Jays. Which Canadians played lesser roles on this team? We focus a lot on Nate Pearson. We're going to see some other young players, I think, make this team. Not the lower level prospects that were included on the Blue Jays player pool, 58 men announced on Sunday. But I think that guys like Patrick Murphy are probably finding a way onto this team right now. Are there some people who you're keeping an eye on who you think are going to sneak onto that initial 30-man roster for opening day?
I'd really like to see a Patrick Murphy or Julian Merriweather in the bullpen, just to give like Charlie Montoyo some really big arms to throw out there. Like Patrick Murphy was so impressive in spring training, and if he has that new delivery down, like I think he could really be a useful bullpen weapon. And Julian Merriweather's been up to triple digits. At times as he comes back from Tommy John surgery. He's like 28 years old. Like, throw him in the majors and let him pitch out of the bullpen and let's see what he's got there. And the other name that I'm kind of keeping an eye on is Santiago Espinal, who I think is just like a perfect fit for that taxi squad because he can play so many different positions. He basically play anywhere but catcher in a pinch. He played a bunch of center field last year in the minors, and he's obviously capable around the infield. He's a guy who had a huge spring training with the bat. He had like 7 extra base hits in 13 games, and he's a guy who I could see being called upon if the Blue Jays needed somebody in a pinch.
Well, called upon in a pinch during those 15-16 seasons were Jeff Francis, Andrew Albers, and Scott Diamond. 23 of you getting that. That's the majority answer there. So well done on that front on a really tough question. Let's see, check the impact on the leaderboard. WAF back on top, tied with G-Man 99. I think this is a SNIQ first where we've had 2 people with the exact same score atop the leaderboard. Muck, Ari Safari, and Wheels remain within striking distance. Ben.
All right, let's see if we can break that tie as we round out our Canadian Blue Jays section with a question that might be painful for Blue Jays fans. Who is the Canadian taken 1 pick before John Harris in 2015? Obviously, John Harris hasn't materialized, but to pick up on that discussion, guys, about pitching staffs and how to construct it, I do think that Merriweather, Hatch, Patrick Murphy, these guys are really interesting. And in a normal season, the decision might be, we want them stretched out. We want them in the minors. We want them developing as starting pitchers. Now, that's not an alternative. So if you want them pitching at all, if you want them contributing at all, it's going to be in the major leagues. And I think they do have that potential. And I think that we might see them used in different ways. They might not be starting games for the Blue Jays, but they might be contributing in 2 or 3 inning roles.
I think the Jays are going to have to do that. Every team, to a degree, is going to have to diversify their innings because, we always think about straight on arms in terms of workload, but because this is a sprint, not a marathon, and every game is important right out of the gate, I think we might see more max effort type of exertion from pitchers. That carries a lot of risk for potential injuries if guys are going all out all the time, and carrying a bigger pitching staff and diversifying the amount of people carrying the load of those innings might be a way to help protect some guys from overuse injuries in that regard.
Yeah, and it has to be max effort. When you're playing 60 games, you can't afford to let any sneak away. Mike Soroka, the correct answer here. Most of you got that one. Nice work as we head to the leaderboard. Final question here from the Canadian Blue Jays section. And we see WAF in the lead here, followed by Muck, Ari Safari, G-Man 99, and Wheels. Arden, over to you as we get set for the Canadian player section of the quiz.
That's right. Going to test some MLB-wide knowledge here. In 2002, the Reds made Joey Votto their 2nd-round pick in a decision that obviously paid off. In fact, only 1 first-rounder from 2002 has generated more WAR than Votto. Who is it? And I think that you are bang on, Shi, in that we are going to see, unfortunately, some arms shredded this season. I think we're going to see some relievers and starters go down to all kinds of injuries as pitchers go through like a 3-week ramp up into a season that is going to be balls to the wall just from the get-go. There has to be a lot of pitchers out there who are kind of looking at this season and just a little bit worried about the impact it's going to have on their shoulders and elbows.
Further to that, Arden, it's guys have had really a wide range of are going to come in a wide range of readiness because guys have had different resources available to them depending on where they've been sheltering, right? Some guys might have had a catcher and been able to work out at a proper facility, and some guys who've been in areas that are a bit more remote might have been throwing into a net or against a wall. So that's another contributing factor. And, I think pitchers are going to have to be very, very careful. And the staffers who are responsible for tracking workload and strain and the training staffs, they're going to be carrying an extra burden on top of the COVID-19 concerns.
In a typical 162 game season, in the first month of the year, we typically see a lot of hamstring issues, a lot of obliques, soft tissue injuries, and that's with the full spring training to get ready. This is going to be with 3 weeks coming off of whatever this prior period of quarantine has been like for these players. I think that health is going to be a very big story in this MLB season, and whichever teams are able to maximize health and keep their players on the field are going to be at a real advantage in this sprint towards the playoffs. Zach Greinke was the answer. Most of you got it, so I would expect that atop leaderboard we are probably going to see WAF maintain that lead. Muck and Ari Safari hanging around as they were last week. They're both trying to get into that poll or into that top position on the leaderboard there. Jason G-Man 99 also in the conversation, Shi.
All right. We go to our next question. During the 9-year period of 2010 to 2018, Joey Votto led the National League in OBP 7 times. Who led the NL in the other 2 seasons? Guys, we talked a little bit about pitchers on the 58-man player pool. A couple pitchers who I thought were interesting adds: Alek Manoah, Simeon Woods-Richardson, Jordan Grashans from the position player side, guys who were in the lower levels of the Blue Jays system, guys who weren't going to factor into the big league plans in all likelihood this year. Ben, why do you think those guys were added?
For me, it's very simple. If you want these guys to develop and have the chance to face live pitchers or hitters, this is the best possible environment for that. We are not expecting a minor league season. And as you said before, these guys can't be expected to just create their own scrimmages and have these opportunities absent some sort of infrastructure from the team. So this is the chance for these priority prospects to face other professionals in a season where that's honestly a luxury. Not every pro player is going to have that opportunity this year.
And a luxury is the knowledge that Bryce Harper and Andrew McCutchen were the 2 other players to lead the NL in OBP other than Joey Votto. 37 of you, the big number there. Getting that one correctly, I'd expect that will mean some stability on the leaderboard as we check where the standings are at. And no movement whatsoever there as we go to Ben with the next question.
All right, this one is another Russell Martin question. He went pro in 2002 after the Dodgers drafted him. Another team picked him 2 years earlier. What team was it? So we'll let everyone contemplate that answer. But to build on what we were saying before there, I really think that when you're a prospect who's maybe early in his development, like a Jordan Groshans or a Simeon Woods-Richardson, that opportunity to play against other prospects or other professionals, the Caleb Josephs, the Andy Burns of the world in Buffalo, I don't know exactly what that looks like, Arden. It's hard to imagine some of those details, but you have to think that a big element of those scrimmages would be live at bats, right? And they have to create some room for development.
You're gonna get some good stories from Andy Burns. I can confirm that. You're gonna get some good anecdotes of minor league life for anybody who's ever interviewed Andy. Here's a great quote. Yeah, no, you're right. It's like just being in a competitive environment, right? And competing against other, young, hungry players. And even like building a little bit of that like chemistry and camaraderie is important. Like we've seen the Blue Jays do all kinds of interesting team building activities from a development standpoint over recent years, whether it's, working with Canadian forces at, base at Petawawa, or even like working with U.S. Army Rangers on some team building stuff. They've actually taken like group trips as prospects to the Dominican to go and see like what life's like at the complex and what life's like for their, Latin teammates when they're growing up. So, the Blue Jays really invested in all that kind of developmental stuff from a team building standpoint. So I think that just getting these young players who the Blue Jays are hoping they're going to build future competitive big league clubs with together in one place, working together and getting to know each other, I think the Blue Jays see a lot of benefit there.
Yeah, for sure. As we look at these answers, I see a lot of wrong answers. That's great. That's a good sign. And the correct answer here, Montreal Expos, they drafted Russell Martin. He ended up going to Chipola College, where he would play with one Jose Bautista, future teammate. Let's see the leaderboard and see if WAF is still up top. And it looks like WAF is indeed in first place. Muck, Jason, Wheels, Ari Safari, you're all in contention, but you got some catching up to do. Arden, your turn.
All right, here we go. Which of these Canadian MLBers does not bat left-handed? Seems like every Canadian player hits left-handed, shoots left-handed. One of these individuals does not. Look, we're not going to see Jordan Groshans on the Blue Jays this year. We're not going to see Steven Woods Richardson on the Blue Jays this year. If Austin Martin signs and is added to this player pool, we're not going to see him on the Blue Jays this year. The one name that I would give a very small percentage chance of pitching for the Blue Jays this year is Alek Manoah, because he is advanced and he has an extremely hard fastball and a wipeout slider. And if you were like in a playoff push in the last days of the season and you needed a reliever desperately because, these guys are hurt and these guys are tired and these guys have COVID, and it's like we're either going to make the playoffs or we don't, depending on whether we get somebody in here to pitch right now. I feel like Manoah is the one guy from that group who has like a small percentage chance of pitching for the Blue Jays this year, but I really don't expect we're going to see, and realistically, we're going to see any of those prospects at Rogers Center or wherever the Blue Jays are playing this summer.
Yeah, I would love to see, of all the players there, Alejandro Kirk is so fun. I mean, that would be great. I think, we'll see him eventually. Maybe it'll be next year. But Manoah, that's a good point, Arden. I think when you look at what he could do in a short burst, very specific role, it's not to say he's starting games for them, but in a specific role, he could help. And I think the Jays will be very cognizant of that.
Did you have something there, Shai?
I was just going to say, you outlined basically the only scenario where I could see that happening. I mean, the guy hasn't pitched, hasn't thrown a single pitch above low A. It's not like he's shot through multiple levels to progress this season and to force a big league debut. It would really have to be a specific set of circumstances to justify both the developmental aspect and also starting a service time clock that early.
Yeah, it would have to be, we are sacrificing a bit of development and obviously that service time clock in order to possibly make the playoffs like this year, because we have a very real chance to. When you look at the Blue Jays schedule and how the season is likely to play out, it's pretty unlikely that in those last days of the season, they're going to be in a position where they're thinking, we're really pushing for a playoff spot here. We have a chance to do something special. It seems unlikely. But yeah, that is like the, 2% outcome that possibly could see Alek Manoah on this team. You're not going to see any of these guys realistically. Did most people get Jason Bay? Most people did get Jason Bay, although not everybody. It looks like the majority of people did not get Jason Bay, which is good because maybe we're going to see some movement on the leaderboard here. WAF out of first spot. Muck is in the first spot. WAF is learning, like, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like, it is tough to stay atop the mountain on SNIQ. Let me tell you, we have seen some real precipitous collapses in recent editions of SNIQ. So let's see if WAF can finish this thing off. We're going Shy. You're up next.
Well, I'm glad that we're continuing the one trend on this show where, Arden, you troll anybody who loses the lead when you're asking a question. Which of these players leads all Canadian MLBers with 84.2 career wins above replacement? You guys mentioned it briefly. Austin Martin going to sign in all likelihood and be added to the roster. It's one of the reasons why 2 spots were left open on the 60-man player pool. One other spot, and we were chatting about this privately a couple of days ago when the roster was let out, wondering what happened to Mark Zepchinski, what happened to Yency Diaz. Do you guys have any theories on what they're going to do with that extra spot?
I wonder if it's just a way to keep things flexible. I mean, let's say they have injuries, whether COVID related or otherwise, to a specific group of position players like catchers, middle infielders, center fielders, relievers, and they become very depleted in that one area. They would need then to add someone. So whether it's from inside the organization or outside, you want to have a little flexibility. Honestly, when you look at some of the names in that group, I might have left more space. I like, no offense to, some of the pitchers at the back of that roster, I might have left more space, and then you can have the flexibility to add them if needed.
Absolutely. I think that one of the considerations for the Blue Jays was how do we manage both depth and development? And I think that was a driving factor in a lot of their thinking. 2 tough choices here. 2 Canadian Hall of Famers in Cooperstown is either Ferguson Jenkins or Larry Walker. Ferguson Jenkins, the all-time leader in WAR amongst Canadian players. 31 of you getting that answer correct. And let's see when any change on the leaderboard as we start entering crunch time here. Muck continuing to maintain a narrow lead on WAF. Jason also within striking distance. Wheels, Ari Safari can get there, but might need a little bit of help. Ben.
All right, we got some tough questions here. So if you're not on that leaderboard, stay with us. I think there's the potential for some more changes here. Matt Steers holds the MLB record for the most pinch hit home runs in a career. With which of the 13 teams he played for did he hit the most pinch hit home runs? That's always a fun moment in a baseball game when you get a nice pinch hit home run. But yeah, when you look at this Blue Jays roster, I think there's potential on here for some good storylines, but really they're going to need some of those big cogs, some of the guys that they acquired this offseason, like a Tanner Roark and a Hyunjin Ryu, to take a lot of those innings. I mean, as much as we talk about those prospects, they're going to need the veterans on this staff to haul some innings, Arden. And I think, that's something that even in a 60-game season, you need the veterans to step up and do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, you look at that 58-player pool that we saw, and there's kind of like 3 tiers to it, right? Like there are the regulars, and there are the guys that we expected to be on the 26-man, and then there are the depth players who the Blue Jays will be calling on if there's injuries or COVID-related absences, and there are those prospects that are far off that we were talking about. You need that top tier to perform and be good, because if they don't, like, you're just not going to have much hope in this season. If you lose like 7 in a row, if you go on a skid like that, it's probably your season right there. Like, it's going to be really tough to dig out of some of those holes. So yeah, as you mentioned, the Shoemakers, the Roarks, you're going to need, obviously Bichette and Guerrero, but even like you're going to need some contributions here from Randall Grichuk and Brandon Drury, and you're going to need, maybe Rowdy Tellez to win you a game at some point. Those are the guys that really are going to be, deciding your fate one way or the other.
Yeah, every game matters a lot. I actually think managers will matter more this year. I think managers have the potential to make a bigger difference, because if you manage the way you've always managed, like, that's not a good call. That's not going to help your team. So I think they really have to adapt. I'll be interested to see how that goes. We saw a lot of correct answers here, a lot of incorrect answers. So let's see the leaderboard and see how things have developed, whether Muck has retained top spot. And yes, there is Muck in number 1. Some familiar names at 2 through 5 as we hand it over to Arden.
All right, let's see where we're going here. Question number 17. Which Canadian pitcher earned the win in the final Toronto Blue Jays Montreal Expos game ever played? Denny Boucher, Paul Quantrill, Sean Hill, or Paul Spaljarek? Shai, let me ask you a question. If you were a minor league player right now and you were not named to the 58-man roster, the 60-man roster of your team or what have you, what are you doing right now? Where do you go from here? What are you expecting?
You are hoping against hope that the prospect league that has been talked about but has not moved to any sort of finality, possibly an expanded version of the Arizona Fall League, gets off the ground, and then you really hope that you are invited to it, because that is probably the extent of your chances to get on a field this season. I guess, the other outside possibility is that, maybe if there are some injuries to teams in Japan or in Korea, maybe you can get on a roster there. Chances of that, that's only helping at most a handful of guys. So, there really aren't a lot of options for you to get any sort of meaningful ball playing done this season. And you're looking to stay sharp any way, shape, or form that you can. You're going to have to get creative about it.
Yeah, you hope that your organization is one of the ones that's committed to keep paying your allowance and your stipend, as the Blue Jays are one of them. They've committed to doing so for all their minor leaguers through till September 7th, which is traditionally when minor league season would end anyway. So that gives you a little bit of comfort if you're in one of those organizations. But yeah, some of these guys, they just need to make some money. This is their job, and a lot of guys actually pay to play baseball. And, some of those career minor leaguers leave the game with less money than when they entered it. So these guys have bills to pay. They have, families to support. And if you don't have those opportunities overseas where there's strict caps on however many foreign players you can bring in, maybe you got to look to getting a job in another industry, or maybe you got to look to trying to go play some indie ball or something. It's going to be it's an interesting time for minor leaguers, not a certain one at all. Sean Hill, the correct answer. 19 of you got it. 15 thought it was Paul Quantrill, and 15 were wrong because it was Sean Hill. Let's take a look at the leaderboard here as we go down the stretch. Muck staying up there. Wheels coming into second place, making a push for the title. WAF just slowly bleeding away. You had it, man. You were right there. You were in pole position, and you couldn't hold on. You couldn't handle the pressure, WAF. We're going to move on. We're going back to Shi, actually. This is Shi's question.
All right. We're really right down to it. No stumbles now. Which of the following head of baseball operations / general manager is Canadian? David Stearns, Farhan Zaidi, Matt Klentek, or David Forst? Arden, you brought up minor leaguers and the uncertainty there. What do you think a prospect league makes some sense, or should they just say, look at the difficulties getting a major league season up off the ground. Let's just, take the summer off. It's not ideal. You managed to get a little bit of money. Just, develop as you can. Let's be safe, and let's try to reset in 2021 when hopefully there's a vaccine or a more reliable treatment.
I love the idea, and I love it in theory. I do wonder about the execution, because you look at, how many protocols and stipulations players and staff are having to go through in order to play an MLB season. You have to do those same things for those minor leaguers in that prospect league, and likely you're going to be looking to play that prospect league in Arizona or in Florida. And I don't know if anybody's looked at the case counts in Arizona and Florida lately, but they are off the friggin' chart. So there's going to be some real hurdles to pulling that off. But I think that you have to try as MLB and as clubs. It's going to come down to whether clubs are willing to make the financial commitment and the resources commitment in order to try to pull that off and pay players and put them up somewhere and feed them and instruct them and transport them and all those things. And then also a pretty rigorous testing protocol that would have to be in place as well. So look, you're right, Shi, you can find a million reasons not to do it, but I do think that MLB franchises owe it to these athletes to try their best to do so.
Yeah, I think you can certainly make that case there. 24 of you knowing that Farhan Zaidi was born in Sudbury, Ontario, before he moved to the Philippines, largely raised there, returned to the United States for his schooling before finding his way into the game. Little known fact about Zaidi is that when he was with the Oakland A's, Alex Anthopoulos tried to lure him over here to be part of his front office on multiple occasions. And when Anthopoulos left the Blue Jays to join the Dodgers, he was reunited with Zaidi and ended up working with him there. Let's see what the leaderboard looks like right now. And Muck is hanging on. WAF back into second place. Wheels, Jason right there, but you need Muck to stumble. There are a couple questions left. Can he hold on? Ben, you've got next. We're going to watch this dramatic top leaderboard play out.
All right, this is a tough one. At the 2004 Olympics, which former first-round pick made the final out of Canada's 8-5 semifinal loss to Cuba? Not even an image here to offer any clues. You guys are on your own. So, Muck, if you can get this one, you'll really be earning it. On a slightly different note, guys, shortened season. There's a lot of talk about a 400 hitter. I have a two-part question. I'll start with Arden. Do you think anyone can do it this year? If so,
I missed the second part of your question there, Ben, because you were breaking up. But do I think somebody could do it? Yes, I do. I mean, I more think we might see like an entire season in which a player doesn't draw a walk, or an entire season where, you know, maybe a guy only like strikes out, you know, at a very like low amount of times. But yeah, 400 hitters certainly on the table, although in today's era of baseball, it's less likely.
Shai, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I as much as I'd love to see it happen, I just think it's really tough to have a high batting average these days because of how good defenses are and how smartly teams are able to position defenders.
I agree with you guys. I think the league leaders will come in around 365. Maybe a Christian Yelich, DJ LeMahieu. They could hit 365. I'm not seeing 400. Kevin Nicholson, the correct answer here. Most of you got this wrong, so this might actually shake up the leaderboard. Let's take a look and see how things are looking here. But Muck holding strong. Jason, Wheels, WAF, Johnny Cooley, a new entrant on that leaderboard. Arden, we'll hand the questions over to you.
Hey, it's tight at the top there. So, you know, this question could make some difference. In the 2002 draft, 2 Canadians were selected among the top 9 picks. Who were they? Guys, what about reliever usage in this season? Because Ben and I kind of talked about that in Ad Letters last week. And, you know, you might see some relievers getting used like 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, and then they're down, and then they're back. Like, do you think that maybe relievers are going to be pushed to the limits this year, Ben?
I think so. I think teams are going to guard against it to an extent. They're going to have front office employees and coaches in their ears saying, look, we got to be cautious here. But man, if you're a manager, and again, managers are going to be judged by how they can do in those close games, how they can salvage those extra couple of wins. The strategy there is going to be important. Push comes to shove. If you're a contending manager, I think you tap that guy on the shoulder and you ask him for an extra inning.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be there, but I really worry about the health implications attached to that. And I think because you've got expanded rosters and because you don't have to, the limit on how many pitchers you can carry is gone. I think that some teams are going to diversify their innings a little bit more, just out of preservation of their key arms, because there are risks to asking guys to go in day after day into leverage spots to constantly pitch without a lot of rest.
I am actually surprised at how many people got this question correct. It was Adam Lowen and Jeff Francis, and 30 of you got that. So let's see what kind of impact that has made on the leaderboard this week and who our champion will be for the 3rd edition of SNIQ, the Canada Day edition. Let's take a look at the podium. In 3rd place, 18 out of 20, Wheels. I've seen you on the podium before. You're back. No gold medal this week. Jason is in 2nd, 17 out of 20. And in 1st place, Muck. WAF not even on the podium. Not even near it. God. And WAF on 4th. Sorry, no medals for 4th place, WAF. Muck wins this week. We see Muck up there in recent weeks, Wheels as well. There are some really knowledgeable Blue Jays minds out there, some people who know their history. And once again, we have not made these questions difficult enough, guys.
I have to be the voice of Wheels right here and say, how is Wheels in 3rd place with 18 out of 20 correct?
Slow on the trigger.
That's it. Yeah. We mentioned it at the outset. You've got to be quick. You wait for the reveal to get your answers in, and you are going to lose points, and that costs Wheels despite having the most answers. Guys, I thought this edition was actually pretty tough with some of the questions we put together. I thought that looking back, we got some obscure names. We went into the almanacs a little bit to dig out some fun facts, and Blue Jays fans keep on stepping up and delivering. So I guess it's back to the drawing board for us a little bit. I'm not sure what to do at this point, but it's an interesting time, and we actually got to talk a little bit more baseball this week, and that's been great. And we'll have by the time we do the next version of this, we should have a sense of where the Blue Jays are at, and in a sense, they're sort of the ground zero right now of baseball. in terms of the uncertainty and the havoc that can be caused by trying to play through an epidemic. And certainly, we can appreciate how the Canadian government has managed the pandemic to this point, and be grateful that we are in a situation where we're a much preferable place to host games and to host these things in a lot of spots in the United States right now. And clearly that's what's driving some of the uncertainty right now in terms of where the Blue Jays will ultimately land. So either way, by the end of next week, or by the time next week rolls around, we should have a sense of where the Blue Jays are going to be. We'll be able to talk about that and a whole lot more. Thanks to everyone who played along. We hope you had a good time, and we'll catch you next time on SNIQ.